Okay, Bus Bench Babes, we have an awesome episode today. We are interviewing Maddie and Alex, first-time home buyer, millennials, and they just navigated this whole home buying experience on their own. And really, as real estate agents, we need to know what is in the mind of a millennial when they're purchasing their first home. And we are going to ask all of the questions that we all need to know. So let's dive in and do this.
You're listening to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast, where we invite you to check your ego at the app, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to dive into all things real estate marketing, social media, friendship, hardship, love, money mindset, and all the things that celebrate you as a badass boss babe.
We're here to encourage you, show up for you, give you a loving kick in the pants when you need it most, and be your soft place to land on the hardest of days. So pull up a seat at our table and get ready to be inspired and start living your best life by design.
Welcome to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast. We are so excited you're here.
Okay, girls, let's dive in.
Okay, Bus Bench Babes, we are going to chat today all about what it looks like to work with a millennial. Let's face it, this is something that a lot of us are missing when it comes to real estate, on how to market to them, what they're looking for, and how things are just different now. So welcome to the show, Maddie and Alex. We're so excited to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having us. Happy to be on.
Well, okay, so Maddie, I met you once. Your mom is going to be the latest person on our team. She's the latest agent joining our team, and she's already on our team now, and it's so exciting. And so I met you when your parents were selling their house, and it was your childhood home. So I just met you in passing when you were visiting Minnesota. But tell us about yourselves. Like what brought you to Texas, and what do you do for fun?
Yeah, so Alex and I are two transplants in Texas. I'm originally from Minnesota. He's from North Carolina. And we moved in 2018 following first job out of college. So wherever the first job was that one of us got, we agreed we were just going to both go.
Oh,
I actually followed her.
Yeah.
She had the job first, and I just kind of trailed along.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Good choice, Alex.
Yeah.
Smart man.
It worked out for me.
It did. And we both ended up in aerospace, not by degree, but by kind of falling into it. So really Houston's cool. A really good city for that.
We like to joke around that we're more of inside cats than outside cats, despite the fact that I have a lot of friends who like camping and that I drive a Subaru. We don't like the outdoors that much. So we spend most of our time inside. Our favorite things are kind of trying new restaurants and bars. We both play video games occasionally. I like to cook a lot. So we spend a lot of time inside. So the house is kind of important for us as we spend most of our time here.
I love it. Some of my friends always talk about they have a mutual friend. It's a friend of my husband's, and he is like an indoors guy, and they call him the avid indoorsman.
Yes, that's a good way.
That's what I would probably describe you guys as. I love it.
That's really
I love it. So what prompted the idea of buying your first home? Like, if you have jobs that might move you around, like where did the thought process start to get the ball rolling for buying a home?
So you kind of hit the nail on the head. For a while, we both were in jobs where if we needed to up and move, we would have no problem doing so. Or if there was going to be a new job that was more exciting in a different city, absolutely would do so. But
rent.
Yes.
Yeah,
Rent.
It's brutal. Is it brutal in Houston too? In Minneapolis, it's insane.
Yeah, it was. We have friends that are getting raised at lease renew several $100s a month. It's just jumping. And the same is going to be true for us. And, you go down, you make a stink at the realtor office, and they tell you, well, you're already below market rate. This is the best we can do. We don't set them. It's just
because the apartment complexes, they don't. That's just what
all the complexes in the area are owned by one overarching,
Oh, like the man. So like
you're not going anywhere.
You would have fallen on deaf ears.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Did you guys rent when you first moved to Houston?
Yes.
Okay.
We rented for 4 years in 2 different complexes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until Alex, his latest job that he started about a year ago, is like a really good fit. I'll let you talk about it because it's your job, but.
Yeah. So at the beginning of 2021, I was really looking for a new job. I hated where I was, and we were actually looking at moving out of Houston. But I landed a job with Axiom Space. It's a small, growing space startup. We actually just had our first major launch today. First commercial
exciting.
crew to the International Space Station. Yeah, it was great. But yeah, so at the time, you asked why we started saving for our house, what made us decide. That pile of money started out as budgeting for a wedding.
Okay.
Yes, that was the wedding fund.
We are engaged. And the thinking was, well, we can get married in Houston. It's, a lower cost of living. It's fine. And we'll move out after a little bit. And then unfortunately, I ended up with a job I can see myself growing in for the next 10 years at least. And
yeah, so it just made sense at that point for us to look at a house, look to put down roots versus before, if we were ready to go at any moment, it just didn't seem worthwhile to go through all the effort of buying a house. Because we were kind of alternating. One of us would love our job, one of us would hate it.
Yeah.
One of us would love, one of us would. So it was never both of us happy. And we finally hit that a year ago, and it has stayed true. So that's what made getting a house in the area really reasonable.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Good for you. So you just really summed up why at a younger age and before marriage, and you're navigating this a little bit differently. You're doing it without the help of your parents, correct? Like, it's a very different process. You're in a different city. So you really summed that all up in that one question. I had a couple more, but I think you just answered them for me. No, that's great. That's really great. So can we dive into, I think, just a little bit here, why do you think millennials get such a bad rap? Like, reality versus stereotype? Because right now you make up a huge part of the real estate market, a huge percentage. And you kind of get a bad rap. Like, you just, and so we're trying to navigate this and figure out how to sort of debunk these myths that are out there.
So I think one thing to keep in mind, we're on the younger side of millennials.
You are, yeah.
So we're 27.
Yeah.
So a lot of, when we talk about millennials, we're probably crossing the millennial Gen Z weird zone in between.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the bad rap people like to assign to millennials is that they're not hitting the adult milestones when their parents did. And it's in part because it's a really different world to look at. Like, between the two of us, we had spent $50K on student loan debt to start. So we tackled that before we even thought about house or wedding or anything kind of
That's
that
so
magnitude.
Smart. Yeah.
And because you're not hitting those milestones, people tend to think of it as an extended youth, or you're kiddish for longer.
Yeah.
When in reality, you're just prioritizing different things.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because you want to travel doesn't mean that you're not an adult. It just means that's what's more important to you right now.
Well, and not because you didn't want to get married at 23 and have babies at 25.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, that's what a lot of the parents did back in the day. And
Yep.
I love that.
I do too. So let's pivot a little bit and chat more about your actual home buying experience and where you sort of made your decisions, because again, you're making up a really large percentage of the marketplace right now, and being on the younger end is actually really cool because that's making up an even bigger percentage right now. So where did you go first? How did you start this process? Did you go to a realtor, a lender, or what did that look like for you?
So I had a coworker who had recently bought a house that was just a couple of years older than me. And she had a realtor that she knew, I guess, before they were an official relationship. They were in a running club together. And she talked about how great her realtor was. When we started thinking about looking for a house, I contacted her and said, hey, I'm scared of looking at reviews and stuff. I don't know who to pick, who to go with. You said you had somebody that was really great. Can you put us in touch? And she did. And we ended up with that realtor first. She was fantastic. We met at a coffee shop. Our first meeting was just going over the basics. We went through lists of budget, what we have for down payments, locations, areas, wants, dislikes, don't wants. Really just find out what was realistic for the area. She introduced us to the real estate website for the area. I know most people use something like Zillow and all those other, for the Houston, I think Texas area, there's a site called HAR, H-A-R. And that was
It's
a little more
probably the Houston Association of Realtors.
something like that.
Yeah.
But it was better than some of those bigger, larger scale ones. It was more up to date. Oftentimes had better pictures, better information. So we used that a lot. Once we decided to seriously look, you asked about lenders. So we started with that realtor. Once we decided to seriously look, we went honestly online where everybody else goes and started using sites like NerdWallet to look for lenders.
So one thing I want to highlight that our realtor did that was really nice, that first meeting, we kind of walked in not even knowing if our budget was realistic for what we wanted. And she kind of sat us down and gave us a really honest, yes, you will probably end up looking at a lot of stuff. What you find will not be perfect. You will end up with a house probably with projects, which is exactly what we did. We've got a lot of stuff that we want to do here. But she did a really good job of setting the stage for us, as opposed to if Alex and I had started looking on our own, we would have been really overwhelmed.
And that ties into a little bit, like you said, we can call our parents, but it's not the same as having them come to an open house with us and, look through things. So it felt really, really bolstering to have some guidance and to have it walked through,
Mm-hmm. So this is just a total sidebar question. This is just for my curiosity. Is your agent similar in age to you or older? Like, what's the age of your agent?
She's probably around the same age as my friend. So a little bit older, maybe low 30s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How did you guys do your research? Where did you?
So
you talked about NerdWallet, but
So big picture research. What does personal finance in your 20s look like? I admit to being a huge personal finance nerd. There were a solid couple of years.
That doesn't surprise me at all, knowing your mother.
Yes. Her type A, my type A, it matches real well. But there was a lot of information kind of in general about how to save, how to start investing, how to start saving for a down payment. So then once we had kind of reached our lump sum moment, we had this money, we wanted to do something with it. Then we looked to work with the realtor on what was reasonable for the area. Mm-hmm. So we did kind of, for the particulars of each house, trust the realtor not to lead us astray on that one. She was the expert. Yeah. And that's, I think, really what it came down to. We went to experts for expert questions. But like on the personal level, Alex and I would talk through what we wanted together. And then normally we would take it to our parents separately because neither one are local. So, everybody's it's general advice. But I thought our parents did a pretty good job of pointing out scenarios that we hadn't thought of. If there's a certain house that was on a busy street, or did we actually look at the school districts? Did we keep stuff like that in mind? Or to help put things in perspective over, well, that's an easy fix versus a hard fix.
Yeah. Is
the roof in good shape? Is the foundation in good shape? You can paint. And my mom, Amy, was really good about that. She was very realistic about, okay, you guys can put in some sweat here, but the bones are good.
Yeah. How much did your parents' input factor in when making decisions? Were there things that made you're like, oh, shoot, we really wanted that house, and then they kind of talked us out of it? Was there any of that happening?
The talking out of it, not of like a house in specific, but a lot of times, we would talk to each other and be like, this sounds like the right plan. And then I'd go off and call my parents, and it'd be like, that's not the right plan because of this reason. And I'd be like, oh, well, I didn't think about that reason. That's a good point. Yeah. So there was a fair amount of it. Mm-hmm. Not as much as there could have been, thankfully.
Yeah.
One thing I actually want to expound on is Maddie mentioned our realtor providing expert advice. That was in a couple different areas. So on one hand, we had things like, here's how you make the offer and things like that. But on the other hand, it was just like knowing almost the history of the area and housing in general. my best example of that is we waived, or we didn't waive, but we did not get a lead paint inspection done.
Okay.
And I saw that had been checked off, and I worried, so I freaked out, and I called our realtor and was like, "Why did we not do this? Are we going to die? Are we going to get, like, should we be doing this?" And she kind of talked me through, well, your house was built here. This is about when lead paint was starting to be phased out. Here are the realistic dangers. Here are the reasons why we did this and why it worked on your offer. And it made me feel a lot better. So it wasn't just like the finances, but also just some of that history. We also talked about like galvanized steel piping and some of the roof stuff. Like, she knew things about construction and basic house things that really put me at ease.
Did she just tell you not to chew on your woodwork?
That did come up, yes.
It's like the little line you must learn in real estate school. Just don't eat the paint. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Can we chat a little bit more about your realtor and like you mentioning like you went to experts for like expert questions, right? So I know that she was really knowledgeable to you as the process went on, but what originally made you, aside from the referral from a friend, which that obviously played into it, but what else told you like this, you know what, she's someone that I can see us working with, like we can trust her? What was it about her business? What made you feel comfortable?
So she did have a social media presence. It
Good.
was,
Yay, real agent.
Saw her on Instagram, saw her on Twitter. I think she had just like a regular website page too that we looked at before we met her. And then once we had met her, like that kind of sealed the deal. She was very no nonsense.
Yes.
She wasn't trying to sell us on getting a house.
The best way to put it.
Yeah. But she was like, here's realistically what you can get and what you can expect. And if that's something you want to move forward on, here's your next steps I would suggest for you.
She sounds like our people. I like this woman already.
She was good. I came out of that meeting very assured of what would happen going forward, where we were. Like, she just had a folder with a worksheet of everything to go through. It was fantastic. She laid it all out.
And I think what's really helpful is she knew we were transplants. Mm-hmm. We weren't up on, like, in Houston, you have to worry about hurricanes. We didn't have the history to be like, okay, when did Ike hit and what areas were affected? And, like, we didn't have any of that kind of background. So it was really helpful for a realtor, especially working with people that are new to the area, to be able to point out those sort of things. That, okay, if you're looking in this area, just as a heads up, you want to watch for X, Y, Z. So, of course, the list in Houston will look different than the list in Minnesota. Yeah. A little bit different of weather concerns there.
Were you guys able to get an inspection?
Yes.
So, like 50% of people in Minnesota are waiving their inspections.
Wow.
Walk us through like the inspection. Like, how did that go with the house and with the agent and the other agent? And
so we'll actually start by saying we got an inspection, but we waived appraisal. So we did include as part of our offer that we would cover whatever the mortgage was.
So you put in a big appraisal gap in case it were to appraise low. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did it come in play?
It came in exactly where we got
it. Almost always
does.
It almost always does. But if you have the cash, that's great to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And we had kind of fiddled with our down payment. Like, the lump sum was the lump sum.
Yep.
We just futzed around with what
your down payment would look like if you had to move the number.
Exactly.
And that is also something our realtor helped a lot with.
So smart.
Sliding those numbers around.
So our inspection, you set it up.
Our inspection, so actually that was also something, not to keep saying it, but our realtor actually sent over recommended and trusted inspection services at places that she had. So we ended up going with one of those. The inspection I can only describe as a man with a ladder and a backpack showed up and just was a whirlwind through the house for like 2 hours.
It's pretty incredible, right?
He showed up and he's like, "Hi, nice to meet you." Just kept going in. He went into the kitchen and turned on literally every single thing and then left, went in the backyard for a while. I didn't follow around the whole time, but that was really good. I actually had to leave before the end of the inspection, so I was not there for the report. But
Jeanette, our realtor, was there. I was there. And the house is 50 years old.
Okay.
Of course, there's things that are not, I don't want to say wrong, because a lot of stuff wasn't an immediate fix. It was just like by the way, you will eventually need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So the inspection in a lot of ways confirmed what we already knew was probably going to be a problem. We didn't have any showstoppers. We had a little bit of a surprise later on when we had some work done before we moved in, because we had about a month between breaking the lease and actually moving. Like, we got our keys and then a month later we broke our lease. So we were able to come get some contractors in. We redid part of the floor because there was water damage. And of course, once you start looking at something, it keeps going.
It's like everything else is broken.
You opened up Pandora's box a little bit.
Yes. But we got it taken care of. And it was something the inspection was like, this is likely a problem. I can't cut into the wall right now, so I cannot tell you it will be.
It was also, you were here for this and I wasn't, but like I said, I was not there at the ending inspection. I only saw the report, and the report is terrifying. The report says everything is broken. This is deficient. This is deficient. This is
that deficient word is terrifying. You're like, oh my God, I just bought a piece of crap.
I saw it the next morning at work and I panicked. And so I talked to Maddie, and apparently the inspector in person was a little more like, I have to write this down as bad. This is a thing that, like, the roof will not collapse. You'll be fine. You can fix it later.
Yes. It's like, if you built this today in 2022, you would not be able to build this house as it stands. But it's like the majority of it is fine.
So
it was built in the 70s. It was updated at some points along the way. You can tell. Like, that's all it is.
So in general, I just think it's good advice to be there for the inspection, at least at the end, so you can hear a little bit more of the truth and rather not what they have to put into the report.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Well, and the bedside manner of the inspector is a big thing where you're like, how is the delivery of the information? Because it can be terrifying, or it can be like, okay, we've got this. We're okay.
Yeah. Like, I'm so glad we got the inspection done. Yeah. Even if it was scary to see the 70-page report afterwards, it was nice to have him, someone who knew what was going on, the expert again, looking at it.
Well, and a lot of buyers use that as a roadmap for doing updates.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly
great to have it, and then
exactly.
You have that for when the time comes to sell, and you can say, we've done everything on this list, and now the house is in great shape.
Yeah.
Except for all the 8 other things that we found that are also broken.
Welcome to homeownership.
Everybody keeps saying that.
It's crazy though. I have a new construction home and I have stuff happening all the time. My AC's been fixed 5 times and we've lived here 8 years.
Lord.
So I feel like the 70s construction is probably like built to last a little bit better than new construction is sometimes. And like a lot of times you'll have old ACs. You're like, these are as old as you guys are and they work just fine.
Yes. We live in a 1909 and we bought it as a fixer. So we have lived that life for a very long time. I feel you. Yes. But the bones are good. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into some just facts about the younger generations in home buying. So right now, approximately 24% of people under the age of 25 own a home.
That stat really blew my mind.
Is
that surprising to you guys?
Bananas. And 37% of home buying is millennials, and over 50% of all new mortgages are millennials. So
I love that.
You just navigated this, and your generation is definitely doing things differently. So like, what would you say makes it different? And like, what do you think that you're looking for a little differently?
So I think generation-wise, like a lot of my friends who are not looking to buy a home right now, who aren't even looking at like a new apartment, they have Zillow downloaded. They love to watch HGTV. Mm-hmm. We've got so much exposure to looking at somebody's house that we don't know. So we can be brutally honest, mean, however you want to fill in that.
Brutally critical.
Yeah. But, it's kind of that exposure to different things we like or don't like.
It's a lot easier to keep the concept of owning a home or just living in a home at the forefront of your mind. It's fun to look through houses instead of scrolling on Instagram. And, you don't have to go to an open house to look through that. So,
Yeah.
And there were a lot of, when we were looking at the real estate website, there were a lot of times we would roll through pictures and we'd be like, I don't know how this attaches to anywhere else in the house. So then it becomes the puzzle of how does this house actually, like this room, we cannot figure out where the hallway to get there
This is me too every time. It's like you're playing a game of Clue.
Yes.
Yep. So many houses were judged just on the pictures that were there.
Yeah.
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 Did you guys see a bunch of like flip phone type pictures when you were looking for houses where you're like, oh my God, did they hire a professional photographer? Like, why are they not spending money to do that? We're seeing that in Minneapolis quite a bit. It's terrible.
Yeah. Or listings where there's only 2 pictures. One of them is like the outside and one is of like a rusted lawnmower in the backyard. And that's it.
They were selling the land for that one. That one was all about the land and the house was not part of it.
We're throwing in the lawnmower to help you mow your lawn.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, you mentioned just doing things differently and navigating it. The other thing, I guess, obviously my parents wouldn't have done is the first thing everybody does nowadays is Google something.
Yeah.
Aside from our realtor and the things she recommended, everything came from, okay, what's got 5 stars? What are people saying about it? Like, what can I learn about this before I go into it? Because I'm terrified to meet with someone and tell them I'm a new homeowner without having some sort of trust that they're not going to try and take advantage of me.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That's like gold right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, and I feel like a lot of inexperienced agents get weeded out pretty quick because you guys are doing so much research ahead of time. You can't just show up and like be a slick willy salesman. Like you're going to see through that in 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll feel, that's a good
really
word.
disingenuous.
One quick Google search or Instagram scroll and you're like, next. No, thank you.
That's an excellent way.
There were some real estates I looked at on real estate agents on Instagram that were only showing like $1 million houses on their feed. Beautiful, wonderful. Absolutely not in our budget. That is not something we would, and that kind of weeded them out. Even if they may actually operate a lot within our budget, it's just the pretty houses that look nice on Instagram. But to me, I see that and I go, they're not really going to want to spend time with us at our budget to work through.
That has always crossed my mind in my career. I've had I sell every price point, but every once in a while I'll have someone say, well, do you work in my price point? And I'm like, ooh, that is like note to self. We need to be talking about all price points that we work with just so someone isn't feeling like I wouldn't be a match for them.
Yeah. That was something we asked Jeanette. We were like, is this budget something you would work with or would you recommend someone to us?
Yeah.
And part of it was we knew Jennifer was pretty close to our age. We knew she was probably pretty close to our budget. So
that's awesome.
It is. And it's a part of like your research beforehand. Like you're saying, you're doing that, like the Googling, the internet search, the social media, that sort of thing beforehand. You can kind of collect all that information and it goes with your brand identity right there, right away, before they've even connected with someone. I mean, that showcases it.
Which we're always talking about, like building a brand and
how important your brand identity is.
Yeah. For you to like know, like, and trust someone before you even meet them. Yeah. I love that. Well, I love that she has social media presence.
Yeah, I know. Maybe she listens to the podcast.
Well, if she's not, we should have her. You guys are just such a huge part of the piece of the puzzle of like who's buying homes right now. What do you think is being missed when you're being marketed to?
So we talked about it a little bit and how we're not from the Houston area. We wanted the realtor to be from the Houston area. She wasn't born here. She wasn't raised here or anything like that, but she had been here for 10 years. She knew the area really well. And also the strong online presence. There were probably lots of realtors that would have met our needs, but if we can't find anything about them online, that's a lot harder to set up the face-to-face meeting. You're going in really blind.
Yeah, real estate agents listening to this. Are you listening to this? You have to have a strong online presence.
And that doesn't necessarily mean be posting on Instagram all the time or something like that. It just means
you can't have zero things.
You can't have zero things.
Right.
Yeah, you need to have some sort of reason to trust you. And also, this goes in hand with that. But like I mentioned earlier, we kind of felt a little more on our own. So even once we got there, having her feel like almost a stronger presence who knows how to handle this, someone that we can lean on a little bit and help us navigate, that was really, really important because I definitely felt out of my depth before meeting with her.
And especially we were working with an online lender. So some of the conversations we might have had with a local lender about, does it make sense to waive appraisal? Does it make sense? Jeanette kind of filled that role in for us. And she stuck pretty generic on it, but it was still helpful to have, if she's the one human we're working with, she has to know a little bit of everything.
Why did you choose to do an online lender versus using one of her lenders that she recommended?
Honestly, the convenience of it.
Really?
So Better Mortgage they must have had 10 different combos where you can look at, if you do this much, if you spend this much in points, here's how much you pay down, what your mortgage comes to, how does that look over the next 10 years, 30 years, kind of at every single price point. And we're pretty fortunate that we've got just regular W-2 jobs. There's nothing fancy we need to explain away. There's not really anything, we submit, this is what our salary is, this is what it's been for the last 2 years. Nothing that requires explanation. So that's kind of why we felt comfortable going with an online lender.
Did you get good customer service throughout the whole process? It's always fascinating to me because you get very interesting comments from online lenders.
So there were a couple of sticking points. We got handed around to a couple different people over the course of it. And so one of them was awful. And every time we'd ask a question, he'd be like, let me check on that for you and leave or call us back. And this should be an easy question. And then we had another one that was awesome, knew everything, clearly understood. So it was kind of a mixed bag there.
Okay.
Overall, I think it was pretty good. I've even had issues, our mortgage got transferred, obviously, after the first month, somebody knew, and I had issues with that transfer process, and I called them, Better Backup, and they were really helpful, cleared it up for me very quickly.
Okay.
So I can definitely see why it's less desirable to use an online lender, because what if we went from bad person to bad person to bad, that's an entirely different cycle. Or if there was anything beyond just submitting W-2s and tax forms that we wanted to be able to talk through, that would have, I think that would have been a very different situation for us.
Yeah.
So the thing that keeps coming up with what you're looking for really over and over is information.
Yes.
Information available. So the online lender was easier because all that information you could have got from a local lender, but it would have taken longer. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't something you could just sit in your pajamas on a Friday night and figure out, right? That's the difference there. It's that internet.
That's a huge thing. Yeah. We both work 8 to 5 all day. We get home, we had to do almost all of this in the evenings. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So having
convenience.
Yes.
Were you guys in multiple offers? I didn't ask you that earlier.
Yes.
You were. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So there were multiple. Well, what do you mean by multiple offers?
So were you competing against other people for the house?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting that an online lender was even chosen in a multiple offer situation.
We were told we had the highest offer.
Okay.
And I think because we waived the appraisal, they said, and this
huge.
House they had been renting for 15 years. So they weren't living it in anymore. It was completely emptied out. I don't think there was necessarily a sprint to sell if we had gotten, if it had taken an extra 2 weeks or something.
And there probably wasn't an emotional attachment at that point because it was just an investment.
Yeah.
They just wanted a big bottom line.
Yes.
Yeah. And the water damage Maddie mentioned earlier was very apparent. The old vinyl flooring outside in this hallway was just ripped up and shredded. So it, you would walk in the house and that's the first thing you would see. So I wonder if other people saw that and were like, well, who knows what else is under the hood.
Yeah.
So we asked you about what you think is being missed for other realtors marketing to you, or just real estate, I guess mortgage, anything in real estate world. What do you think is missed when marketing to you just across the board as a millennial generation? What do you think is people are missing? What is it?
I think it's the information, like you said. It feels, I don't know if this is true, but it feels like things in general, whether this market or other markets, have gotten more complicated since our parents. When we were first looking for jobs, I had my parents say the thing that all, older generations say, why don't you just show up to their office and hand them a resume? And like you can't do that anymore. That doesn't work.
Because it's 2022.
Right. So if that doesn't work anymore, what else has changed? I can't necessarily rely on my parents, not through any fault of their own, just because things have gotten more complicated.
Yeah.
And I don't know where else to navigate. So I'm going to Google things. I'm going to desperately ask people who I know have done this, that I trust. It's just that information gathering that we really need.
And I think a great way to market to that is to be really aware of what your reviews look like, and if there are anything that you should, like if your reviews are giving a consistent story, whether that's the full story or just like part of it, to try and either outright address that somewhere, where like, let's say your reviews all seem to be coming from people in their 40s and people talking about, this is my second house. This is like, our age loves to read a Yelp review, loves to read a Google review. That's how we choose everything.
Yeah.
So even if your reviews are telling one thing, if you can have a way to address what the reality is, I think that's helpful across the board for anybody running a service.
That's really good advice.
It is really good advice. And as a whole, they say like the millennial can see through anything inauthentic, like immediately with social media.
Social
you know
media
right
especially.
away with like marketing and that sort of, you can see it differently because you're living in a different world and you have your entire life. So everything that you're saying lines up with that. Transparency, information, like just putting it out there. That's really helpful.
I love that.
I do too.
Okay. This one I've been excited to ask you. Okay. Top 3 tips as a millennial. Like what were your top 3 tips that you found most helpful, advice that you would pass along to either realtors working with millennials or a millennial listening to this that's about to buy their first house? What would you say to them?
So for a millennial about to buy their first house, I am a number cruncher. It was so comforting to me to have, okay, if I run all the numbers, if we have a mortgage up to $300K, what does that actually look like monthly? If I do $275 instead, what does that look like? Lining up those numbers and knowing how they fit in with our current budget. Where do we have to make up money? Where was it actually lower than our rent?
Yeah.
Like that was really helpful.
Comparing month to month to like what rent was or would be in a couple of years was huge, because the mortgage, the month to month on a $300,000 house is different than on a $250K house,
Yeah.
So,
and
doing those calculations,
it was very eye-opening for it to be like, oh yeah, this $2,000 square foot house is pretty much equivalent in rent to our 1,100 apartment.
That
like
just keeps going
scale.
up year after year after year.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the future too. You're looking at a couple of years and
yeah,
because that's what we would have to do in an apartment complex is say, okay, we know what our max budget is. If we're assuming 100 to 150 increases every year, how many times do we actually want to move? Well, that resets your budget lower for however long you want to stay in the. It's a complicated puzzle. Versus a house and a mortgage is one price from now until it's done.
Yeah.
Other tips would be look at a lot of things, both online and in person. We went to a lot of open houses, not all of them with our realtor, which was fine because there were many where we were out. It was a nice Saturday. There were 5 open houses. Let's go look at them all in the area. And buying us a couple especially, there were things that I thought she would like or dislike that didn't work out the way, and vice versa. So I do most of the cooking. So we'd look at a kitchen. I'd be like, oh, I hate this. And she'd be like, oh, that's why I went to look at this one. I thought you'd like it.
Yeah.
So it kind of helps narrow down exactly what you're looking for to see it in person.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you can think of?
I think it goes back to is the time commitment of a house. And you guys would know more about this than we would because we were operating that in gut feeling. House feels permanent. How permanent is permanent? That's a subjective thing. But until one of us had a job that we loved that required us to stay local, a house felt too permanent.
This is very interesting because I think a lot of people think that, but I'm like, I think of like, it's cringeworthy to think of how much money that you added up for 4 years of renting. Whereas if you guys would have bought a house even 3 years ago, you would be probably have enough money to move to an upsize house.
Yeah.
Because of how much homes have appreciated. I mean, they've been double digits the last 3 or 4 years.
That's terrifying. There's enough projects in this house.
You're like, no, thank you.
Oh, that's a good point, though.
Yeah, that might be something that's missed when working with millennials is houses don't have to be as permanent as they feel.
No, and you literally, if you got moved somewhere and the market wasn't great for selling, you just turned it into a rental property. You know how much you paid in rent.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So I mean, it could easily be turned into a rental property. So I love that advice because like maybe that I need to be talking about that more when I'm working with millennials. So a lot of times the conversations that I'm having is like, have you ever thought of being a landlord? Even if you're living in the same city or you got relocated, I mean, your first home generally makes a really great rental. And most people don't get wealthy from their jobs. They usually get extremely wealthy through investing in real estate. And some people are like, well, I never really thought about it. Maybe I should be looking at this differently.
Yeah,
but it's good that you guys are saying this, that, homes aren't permanent. They never have to be.
Good to know. I guess it's just it's such a big time and money investment that it feels that way. It feels like, oh, well, we can't move. We just did all of this.
Yeah. Especially if you're doing a lot of the work yourselves, there's like an emotional attachment to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, I'm there. It's a lot. Also, we have a love-hate relationship with our home. Mostly love, a little bit of hate. So. Yeah, I wish you well on your construction remodeling journey. It's going to be fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have a drill, and I think that's it.
So we're coming in with just an apartment's worth of tools.
Yeah.
So a lot of Home Depot trips.
Well, and your agent probably has awesome resources for handymen and any resource. She's got a Rolodex full of names and numbers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this is great.
This has been fun. I actually learned stuff that I am going to use going forward.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. So we just really broke down the home buying process for a millennial, and the big thing I think was information and transparency. So thank you so much, Maddie and Alex, for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations on your first home purchase. It's exciting.
Thank you.
So until next time, remember to keep your face off a bus bench and keep being the badass boss babe that you are. Okay, girls, are you feeling as inspired as we are? We're over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of the Girl, Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast.
If you want more, head over to girlgetyourfaceoffabusbench.com for show notes and more episodes. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. They mean the world to us, and they're what keep us going.
Girl, thanks for being here.